I would say that the biggest thing that stands out to me in the shot, timing-wise, is that all the keys are kind of separated very evenly, right? Evenly timed. So what I would do is kind of add a little bit of variety in the timing of the keys to build interest, and also to make it a little bit more this interest, and also it'll make it a little, we tweak the timing to make it a little bit more believable to the physics of what's actually happening. So that's the thing you're kind of keeping in mind is, okay, well, how long is this character going to take to make that jab? You know what I mean? As opposed to, how long should this character stay in this pose versus that pose, right? So that's what you're kind of really trying to figure out, And it's amazing to me how just shuffling around the keys on the timeline creates almost a totally different shot, So it's almost it's an opportunity for you to experiment with, just retiming your keys can do so much for your shot in this phase when you have just like very, very rough blocking. Just experimenting with how long do you stay in this pose versus this pose can mean so much, and just taking that a little bit of time to explore, different options will change the whole course of your shot, So, I know at the studio we have some really awesome plugins that allow us to shuffle that stuff around really easily, but I'm going to try to do this in the Maya timeline. So the thing with this shot that stands out to me, like I said, is that everything is each key is kind of spending the same amount of time as every other key. So what I would do is kind of analyze, okay, which key do I want to kind of hold longer than other ones? So I'd say if you just scroll past the first portion of this shot, boom. Okay, he takes that jab with the left, and then he goes back to this. So in real life, I would think, okay, well, how long would he really spend in this pose? I think that's too much time spent in that jab pose, because the jab is kind of a quick action, right? Mm-hmm. So boom, I would probably cut the time that he spends here a little bit. So I would go into the timeline. Select all the elements here, the rig. Here we go. So there's frame 10. So let's assume that I like how much time he's spending in this pose, which I think is fine. That's about 10 frames. But this one is the one where I'm going to kind of go in and shorten. So I'm going to take frame 20. Yeah, if you look at your timeline, the keys on your timeline, everything is kind of spaced very evenly. So what we're going to do, this is the first thing that we're going to do, is just kind of, boom, just cut that a little bit. See what happens if we cut 4 frames out, right? Boom, okay. So this is kind of what I think when I have my first head. Okay, so now my intuition, and this is all based on intuition and just kind of thinking of like real life physics in a way. I know it's a cartoon, but you want to kind of imagine, well, you play it in your head, and my instinct tells me that this pose is going to be held shorter, for a shorter amount of time. This one is going to be held for a little bit longer than you have it. So he's going to take that first jab, and then he's going to go back into his kind of this posture before he takes that next jab. And then maybe there's like a little bit of a action that he can do here, like maybe like a bouncing thing, in this pose. So I'm going to hold this pose longer because I feel like it's holding for a little bit too short of a time. Boom. And since I already scooted it forward a little bit anyway, I lengthened it by 4 frames. I think I'm going to scoot this one over maybe like 3 frames. And this is kind of, a lot of this is trial and error as well, you know, so you just kind of, you know, you got to start trusting your instincts quite a bit, you know, whatever your intuition tells you. Okay, cool. So he's, the next key is this one. He's taking that epic punch. What I think here is that he's going to take this right, he's going to do this punch with his right hand, and I think we need some other key between this one and that one, because when I act this out, I feel like I'm going to go back into this kind of pose before I take that third punch. Mm-hmm. So what I would do is make this punch, have this punch, and then I'm just going to copy this key. Copy, boom, and paste it somewhere on the timeline. He's going to take that right hook, and then he's going to go back in here, right? And then, so let's say maybe this punch takes probably 5 frames away. And then we're going to wait a little while until he makes that big punch. We're going to stay in here for a bit of time. Then he's going to wind up for, I'd say, like I said, trial and error, guesstimate 6 frames before he makes the epic punch, the uppercut. Okay? Mm-hmm. And the thing about this uppercut, you want to keep in mind, is that I think you're moving to the uppercut. This action, you're probably moving through it too slowly. Because if you think about how much time this action would take, it would go by really fast. And I think you got like almost half of the shot dedicated to that one action. So I would say that most of your time is going to be spent working in between these frames. And what I'm going to do with the rest of these keys, I'm just going to kind of scoop all of these keys down, because I think that particular specific action is going to take less time. You know? So you're just thinking about the actual real life physics of what's the actions that are happening, and you're just timing them accordingly. Boom. And this is even, and so this last key, we're going to want to hold on this last key, because that is kind of like the button. That's kind of like the button of the shot. You know, so right now you got it on frame 80, and I'm just going to continue to compress the big, this big punch uppercut, because I think it's not going to take as much time as you have. And we're going to leave at least, I don't know, I think we're going to extend it to 85 frames. Wait, you know what? No, we're going to keep it at 80. We're going to keep this shot, hopefully, 73. Oops, here's at 80. I think we're going to be able to move these keys over. Does this make sense? Do you have any questions about what I'm doing?
Yeah, it makes sense. I get that, what you're doing. So is this like how you usually sort of go through the first process?
I'll put together like a really rough blocking pass, like what you have here, and the retiming step in my process is so critical. It's unbelievably critical, because, man, I mean, it changes everything. It changes the whole shot. Like, you have to really think. You have to really think about how much time you want each of these keys. How much time you want to spend on each one of these keys, and it can change so much of the thinking process, of like the entertainment value of the shot. Retiming, this retiming pass can change so much about the physics, and so this step of the process is really about kind of like, it really kind of sends you on a path toward a clearer path towards the end goal. It kind of really starts helping you reimagine which direction you want to head in to change everything. So so I retimed this a little bit. Let's see what it looks like.
Yep.
Play blast again. And you just keep on editing it until you like the result, basically. You just give it a different option.
I'm wondering, like, timing-wise, like, you just go by intuition then? Is that what you were saying? Just like off your own gut or something? There's nothing like in betweening and stuff like that? That you don't worry about that yet at this stage, early stage?
Yeah, so to answer your question about intuition, yeah, it's kind of like an instinct, and I think everybody has an instinct of how long an action, a particular action, will take. Because everybody has a sense of physics, like the timing of physics and how long a certain thing will take on screen, but everybody has like a slightly different idea of how certain actions will play out on screens, which is the thing that you bring to your animation that is unique compared to anyone else. Because every animator, let's say all the animators that are working on the production are working with the same model, the same rig, same characters, and then so in hand-drawn animation, I think there's each animator would bring many things that are unique to their process to the performance of the character. But like in CG, it's a little bit more limited to really, because everybody's using the same rig, same character. It's really about the timing. You're expressing like your point of view on like what's entertaining to you, and that's what you're putting down on the screen. And really, it's the timing and then the acting idea, the entertainment value that you bring to the character that is going to really stand out and be unique to you. Just what you feel is entertaining. So part of the process of learning animation is kind of discovering like your own sense of creativity and your own sense of entertainment, and bringing that into like basically what we're doing here. What we're doing is trying to figure out like, well, what's entertaining to me. Part of what's entertaining is a huge part of entertainment value is making sure, I'd say 75% of entertainment value is making sure that the character's actions are believable. Because really, when you get the audience to buy in to the performance of the character, that automatically is entertainment value. That's what's entertaining, is when they believe that character is really alive. So how do you achieve that as an animator? How do you get them to believe that your character is alive and real? And it really, a lot of it boils down to, well, how do these actions play out believably, so, which means if this character were actually real, if I were to do this punching action in real life, like how long would I spend in this key versus this? So it has to be kind of like a believable kind of timing. But because this particular character is kind of cartoony, then there's certain liberties that you can take in animation to caricature it. But it still has to live in a world that is kind of known to us as human beings. It's kind of familiar in a way. So that's why the physics have to play in a very kind of believable and sort of lifelike way for us to kind of buy that character is actually alive in the real world. So that's what all of this retiming is all about. It's making sure that you're staying in these keys and respecting real world physics. So I'm playing this scene back, and I feel like I'm feeling like this. I could spend probably a couple more frames here. I feel like this is probably moving just a little bit too fast. I shortened this key, so now I think I would go back and probably spend a couple more frames in that key, now that I look at it. So you render it, you look at it again, and then you pinpoint little areas that you would want to change. So it's just like a trial and error thing, man. That's really what it's about. So I'm just gonna decide to add a couple of frames to this key right here, right? So I just shifted 38 to 40, right? Okay, cool. So now I'm gonna play this back again. I like how he goes back to something like this kind of pose. When we really dig in, maybe we'll have like a variation, because right now these two are duplicates, but maybe there's a way to, once we kind of flesh it out a little bit, we can add a little bit of variety to those, slight variety to the poses. But either way, the overall idea is going to be that it goes back into this guarded boxing pose. And
I'm actually wondering, say whenever you're like working with controls, how do you handle like so many controls all at once, like when you're posing things?
A really good question, man. I try to keep it as simple as possible. I just try to select all of them and key them all. I just try to what they call it stamping the keys. Stamping the keys. It's just like boom, you just make sure all the keys are lined up in the same, like everything is keyed at the same frame number in the timeline, so it just keeps it super simple and clean in your mind. You don't want to start keying like different elements of the rig and in different parts of the timeline, because then it starts getting really confusing. But I like to keep it super simple for that reason. And yeah, so I just select all. Usually there's like a pick all option, but there isn't one here. So what I do is just drag the mark here over the entire rig, and I press the S key to key them all, right? Yeah, and when I'm blocking things out like this, I just try to. I don't know why there's a key here. I just try to stamp the entire rig on each key. So I look at, that's interesting, because I come from a 2D background, right? 2D animation background, and everybody has a different process. But my process, kind of, I relate it back to how my process was as a hand-drawn animator. I look at these keys on the timeline as drawings. So I wouldn't, you know what I mean? So I look at this as a drawing, and frame 40 is just one simple drawing, and it's the way I kind of simplify it in my mind. I don't try. That's why I like the idea of just picking the entire rig, all the controls, and stamping it, because I look at it as kind of like a drawing, just to keep it simple for my own mind. But so I'll show you how. And actually, a lot of animators work like that at Disney, but there are also other animators that work in different, like splocking or spline blocking and layering techniques and stuff like that, which I haven't really explored too much.
I've heard about layering, but I haven't actually used it either. Yeah. Apparently it's good.
So going back to the keys, refining. So now we're going to refine the timing. We retimed it. Now we're going to refine. Refine. So I say we need a little bit more time on this frame, because it kind of moves through this particular frame a little bit too quickly. So I would say, and that's the big antic. Boom, we're going to stay here, and for that amount of time, and then on 52, we're going to just drag all of these keys over like maybe 2 frames, right? And then we're just going to play blast it again and see what that looks like.
I've also got another question about tangents. Like, whenever you start, say you start with a blocking one first, what sort of tangents do you set up with? Like, do you use linear step or what?
Yeah, I usually just do auto tangent. I just usually work with auto tangent, but we have a plugin that allows us to render keys only at Disney, which is kind of nice, but we don't have that option here, unfortunately. So I think I would, I think the way you have it done here is probably the only way to go, because unless there's a tool out there that would allow us to just render out the keys only in our play blasts, then what I would do is work in auto tangent all the time. The advantage of that is that oftentimes I like working in auto tangent when Why is this not? Oh, the reason why I like working on auto tangent is because I can sometimes find my breakdowns and in between.
Oh.
Like, a lot of my breakdowns sometimes, you know, like. But for the purpose of this particular test, I think we have no option but to work in stepped.
Yeah.
We need to focus. You need to focus on the main keys first and not get too caught up in betweens and breakdowns too early. That's a huge point.
Yeah.
Because you get very confused when you start worrying about breakdowns before you need to. And I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that new animators make, is that they don't really spend a proper amount of time working on their keys and the timing
Right.
and the idea process. You know, they don't really flesh all of the ideas and timing out clearly enough. You know, and they probably move into in-betweens and breakdowns too soon, which makes their ideas kind of watered down and unclear. So that's why it's so critical. This stage is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
Just to make sure you spend enough time figuring out what the timing is, and with just like a handful of keys, the main storytelling keys. Cool. Cool. So that's kind of where we're at right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Punch. Wind up. Okay, cool. And this is just to show you. That's where we started. Okay? So this is where we're at now. You see?
Yeah.
And I think one so does that kind of make sense? It's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit clearer, and the timing is a little bit more true to, you know, the physics of how long, you know, each key should be spent in. And I think the last thing that we could probably refine is maybe this last part. I'd say maybe I would say adding a little bit more time on this pose. So he winds up. He winds up. So I would say we want to spend a little bit more time, maybe say 2 frames here, and then he starts to fall. And then we move through this. The reason why we move through these keys very quickly is because in reality, if this character was kind of losing balance and kind of falling the way he's falling right now, it wouldn't take much time to go through these keys. So that's why you want to put these maybe on 4s, okay? And then let's look at it again. Let's play blast that. So I'm constantly going back and forth to my timeline editor, just reshuffling keys and rendering it out, playing it back. I'm like, okay, is there any other little adjustment, incremental adjustment that I can make at this stage? And I just keep doing this until I'm happy with the timing that I see. And I think that's probably the last adjustment that I'm going to make. Boom. Okay?
Yeah.
That's it.
I like that better.
That's it. Cool. Then we can, that's it for the timing. That's my timing process. You know, just kind of go back and forth. That's clear, unless you have any other questions.
I do have like a question on the main controller, the base one. Do you ever use the base controller? Do you ever use that for like walk cycles or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do. Sometimes you do. If you have a walk cycle moving in place, like if you create a walk cycle where the character is moving in place, and you want him actually, after you have that cycle fleshed out, you want that character moving, you know, after the fact in space, then that's where we call that the TRS, and it just moves the entire character all at once. I don't really use it very often. It's very rare that I use it. But one area, it's hard. If I would, for a walk, if I were to make a walk cycle and then have it translate across a plane after the fact, I mean, you could move the TRS as the walk cycle is kind of cycling through. But the problem with it is that the feet won't have like the proper contact. So if you're gonna have a character, yeah, it's very rare that I animate the TRS. If the benefit of the TRS in animation is that you can just, if you want all of your animation to move a little bit screen left or move a little bit screen right, just to kind of shift this character in screen space, it's very easy to do that by moving the TRS. So sometimes the director will give you a note. It's like, oh, you know what? Actually, for continuity's sake, can you just move the entire character, shift them over a little bit, screen left or screen right, and it's a very easy fix. Because of the benefit of having the TRS, because all you have to do is just kind of shift that up. If it was hand-drawn animation, it would blow up the whole shot. That's one of the huge advantages you have in CG, is that you can just move the entire thing that you animated over a little bit because of the TRS. But normally, I don't really use it for animation purposes, unless I really have to kind of gut a section of animation. If I have a character animated that needs to kind of go, move across the frame or the screen a little bit further than I have it, then one way you could do that is by animating the TRS. And there's a plugin that we have. I don't know if it's available to the public. It's called the World Space Buffer, and it allows you to animate the TRS. And then what it does is, once you have the character animated on it, the way you want it, the World Space Buffer allows you to kind of extract the keys that you have on the TRS and just kind of stamp it on your main controls throughout the body. If that makes sense. It's an amazing tool, and it's a great way to kind of make changes to animation that you have already fleshed out, so you don't have to start all over. Sometimes there's shortcuts, but it's kind of more an advanced sort of thing. But it certainly comes in handy once in a while, yeah. But
the reason why I'm asking that question is because doing the character turning, spinning, and the SWAT, how would you tackle that?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I would try my hardest to just use the controls that I have here, in the rig, which means one way to do that is to just, let's say, select the hips control, and maybe it might be easier to rotate everything in world space instead of object space. So what I would do in that situation is select the foot control, the hips, okay, all of the feet and the hips. Since the feet are an IK, and I would make sure by pressing E, the E button, or the E key, holding it down, and then left click, select world, and this kind of allows you to do that kind of rotation, like a world rotation,
Yeah.
Makes sense? You know about that?
Right.
Yes. I would rather use this, rather than rotating the TRS. Okay. Yeah, because the TRS adds movement. It's just, you want to use as little controls as possible, just for clarity's sake, for simplicity's sake, because the animation gets so complex later down the line. You want to know that most of your animation is on as little controls as possible, so you can make sense of it later. So if you need to make changes, it's easier to make changes. So if we're going to rotate that, then you probably need to take this guy. Like I said, that's how I would do it.
Right.
This is pretty much what I would do, and then you just kind of have to
fix his feet after.
And it's not that hard. Look, it's pretty easy. See?
Doesn't take up much time.
You know, it's tempting to want to use the TRS for it because it's like a global rotation of the entire body, but it just complicates.
I've stopped trying to use it. It's causing too much problems for me.
Cool. So I'm glad that you asked that question because it's a pretty good question.